Okay. Hello? It's loud. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. I have things pressed. Good. Okay. Great. Okay. My name is Lefebvre, and today my presentation is called Leveraging Drupal's ECA module to inspire and automate workflows for site maintainers. I know it's kind of a long title, but I have a good reason. There are a lot of presentations that talk about the Drupal ECA module and just like how to use it. And if you have a good understanding of Drupal development and you know Drupal's history, then you kind of know already what Drupal ECA can do. But if you are new to Drupal, or if you just know Drupal from like an outside observer, just kind of a content user kind of way, I've kind of structured this presentation to kind of be able to appeal to both and just have a good kind of understanding. So you don't necessarily have to have a technical background to get through today, but I'll try to compare to both. So, okay, who am I? My name is Andrew, like I said. This is my second DrupalCamp presentation. I'm a software developer at Lefebvre Labs. I've been working with Drupal since 2022. And as I was making these slides, my kids took me to see the Minecraft movie. And so I have some Minecraft here in my slides. But I was inspired by the movie because it did a great job in portraying what it felt like to play Minecraft and what type of creativity or type of imagination or different types of things are possible when you're playing the game. The movie didn't really explain how the game works or how to play. It wasn't really a movie about that. But the way that Drupal and the way that people interact with Drupal and people that really love Drupal and understand, they know that Drupal does have this type of open-ended creativity, a lot of these building blocks, and Drupal ECA kind of fits into this. And so I'm going to be showing off about where Drupal ECA kind of fits into the ecosystem and how to best kind of leverage things, and also kind of relate things to Minecraft if you have a harder time kind of knowing how Drupal works. Okay, so Drupal ECA, it's a contrib module that's been around for Drupal 10, Drupal 11. It's also available with Drupal CMS, which just got launched this year. So if you're starting up a brand new site and you have a quick CMS development thing, Drupal ECA is already part of that. It allows you to automate processes and extend system workflows. It also has a visualizer modeler, so you can make ECA workflows with a UI that'll go through, and if you're looking for it when you have it installed and enabled on your site, it's under the workflow kind of area along with content moderation or what have you. But you might be thinking, hey, is this like rules? How many here happen to know about the rules module and are quite familiar with it? Oh good, most people, okay, that's good. So yes, ECA is very similar to rules. Rules was very popular back in D7. Rules allows site maintainers to kind of define conditional executed actions based on occurring events, but it didn't get a D10 release until last year, and so there was a need as Drupal 10 was being released last year and the year before that. So Drupal ECA is a spiritual successor to rules. And they kind of overlap with each other. They both provide tools for repeated operations and procedures. But ECA does have some advantages that I wanted to be highlighting today. But if you do like using rules, you can use rules, it's fine. Especially now that rules has a modern release. But ECA, it follows modern Drupal best practices. It's very lightweight on performance. It has an intuitive UI tool, and it aligns with Symfony's event discovery system that Drupal relies heavily on. So Drupal ECA, I'm going to be saying that acronym a lot, but it's a module that processes business workflows, and it's based on Drupal events. I'll go through each of these in more detail, but E stands for events, C for conditions, and A for actions. So when you're talking about Drupal ECA, you're talking about these chains of situations that you want things to happen on your site, and this is kind of extending and doing other things than what Drupal core does or Drupal modules can do. But, so yeah, we'll go through that. Okay, so just an overview for people who don't really know about events. Drupal has a lot of events that happen. There's a Symfony event system, and basically an event is any time your website has a change that's happening to the database or having to config, that there's a kind of trigger that kind of fires, and it's kind of like this Minecraft observer. If you know Minecraft, then that can help. There's a whole event dispatcher and event subscriber system that when you're doing something like updating an entity, there's a whole list of operations and things that happen, and ECA and Drupal Symphony Event System has a spot for us to be able to put in custom code for each of these different things that are happening depending on what you're doing. And when you are configuring these ECA modules, the models, we're going to be looking for the circle there that's above the observer, that indicates an event. So you can define your events with ECA, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, good. Okay, and C are for conditions. So in the modeler, the conditions are represented with these arrows. They represent all of the business logic and when to run code and conditionals. So there's times where you have an event that's firing, like you're updating an entity, and you don't want to have this action that you want to define later to always happen for every single time an entity gets defined. So you can put in conditions. And so conditions are just set as hey, they can be things that are, if a certain value is measured, or if there's an entity that exists, or it's defined, or if you have other types of comparators, or true, false, kind of Boolean things. So there's different times where you want to be, because we can't just have an event or having code that's just running all the time. That we have these events because Drupal wants the system to kind of run when things need to. It's not really designed in a way where everything's running all the time, and conditions kind of limit when these actions are firing to what we specifically want them to. Okay, and then A is for actions. They get represented in these squares when you are looking at the modeler, and they're the doers. They're the executing commands. They're making changes to the database, or config, or rendering items, or doing things with roles and things. They also notify users, or send emails, or change statuses, and they can also update field values. And like in Minecraft, you have these dispensers that just shoot things out, and so once they're triggered, that's it. They kind of just operate and go. Okay. So putting it all together, just to show an example, here's a very basic, kind of simple ECA module, and it also has a Minecraft equivalent if you're interested. So there's an event that, for example, say you have you want to check something, and there's an event of when a blog entity is being loaded, and you want to show a message, but you don't want to show a message to everyone. If someone's not signed into your site, you don't want to show the message to everyone. So the condition that we can have defined here as an example is, oh, are you an authenticated user? If yes, okay, then keep going and execute the action. So we're going to be demoing a bunch of different use cases, or a bunch of different things that Drupal can do. And so this kind of flow of events into conditions into actions is what we're going to be talking about. And if you don't have a coding background, you can kind of look at this from a observer standpoint. From this little block here, it's looking to see, hey, did someone eat some cake as an event? And it's kind of watching to see if this thing happened. And so on Drupal, there's tons of these observer things that are just checking everything. And they're not always running, but when a user or when a command changes the site, these observer blocks kind of fire and do something. And that's a lot of how Drupal's event system works. And then it will send code and information and trigger, and then the action is this light that's turning on. So let's keep that one in mind there. Okay. Okay, so the modeler that ECA uses to be able to build workflows, it's called the BPMN modeler. It stands for Business Process Model and Notation. Some people in the business world kind of know of this already, but it's a kind of flow chart of just chaining up different events for things, and so you can have events that are leading to conditions and then going to different actions that you want. So this is just a visual example of what the modeler is that we'll be demoing later. So if you've seen this before, it's good, but if not, there's just, you have a drag and drop kind of areas of moving things, and the UI is very good at having things connect to things like other diagrams and such. I find that a lot of times when you're doing development, you're having a client that's asking for a thing, they're like, oh, hey, we need this. And then the developer's like, yeah, here, we'll do it. And then they kind of understand what Drupal does, and they kind of build it for them. But the client doesn't really know what's the difference between, a feature that Drupal core can do versus custom code for things. So the client's just asking for a thing, but it's not exactly what they want. It's up to us to kind of bridge that gap in understanding and deliver a product, or to deliver a custom solution with building a Drupal with what will actually work for them. And I find that this visual learn kind of tool kind of helps bridge that gap between people that know code and know Drupal's backend. Drupal has been around for a very long time and has like a good system for being able to just change anything that's part of it, but it's not always visible to the UI what's happening. And so I find that this modeler that will go into and kind of help be used in meetings or being used as a proof of concepts for different things. And then if it's something that can be done with a module that already exists, you can do that. But if it's something in excess or something extra, then you're already using the ECA to do that. Okay, and if you don't like this modeler, Drupal ECA has the regular like Drupal core fields and forms, so you can go ahead and define your events and your conditions and actions, and then all you're doing is just editing the fields and setting which successors you want. So you can have different successor action events that trigger under conditions or what have you. Okay. Good. All right. So just a kind of quick overview of how ECA is working and how you're having these chain of actions being fired. A lot of what's happening with ECA is this concept of tokens, and it also supports Drupal tokens. So a lot of times when we're talking about tokens, it could be either ECA tokens, which are these variables, or it's also the token module, but I'll try to be clear when confusion is coming up. But in this example here, you have a event that's firing of when a user is logging in, and as soon as they log in, there is an action that will read a value. And so the field on users has a field number of logins, which is a field that exists, and all that's happening is that it's storing that entity value as a token and then moving it over further up the chain. So we kind of take values and we can have actions that are getting information from Drupal or loading entities. So in this case, we're just looking at this field value, we're storing it as a token, and then within this like ECA rule, that token is locally bound to this event, and then it's going to be available to all the other actions that are coming up. Yeah. Okay. And then in this case, we have a value, and we want to do an action where it's tampering with it. It's taking that value, and then it's taking that count and it's actually increasing it by 1. So in this simple test, you could have someone that's logging in, and it's keeping track of how many times they logged in. It can be reported out. So it's like, hey, here's how many times you've been logged in. But this kind of concept of taking tokens, taking information, passing information along, that if you have an entity that's loaded, if you're aware of Drupal and aware of how it's like different fields and what things have access to at certain stages, then you can just have the right event defined, and then you have the information that you need to manipulate to do things, and then you just have your actions that you want to fire. Now, ECA has a lot of plugins, so when you install the module, you don't get access to absolutely everything. I find that ECA does a really good job at compartmentalizing the different realms that Drupal operates in, and so you can enable the modules that you need and the plugins that you need within there, so you don't have to write custom hooks for everything. If you know you're using ECA and you need to do things with config, or you're manipulating content entities, you can just enable those said modules. Some just quick examples of what I'm talking about here. So you're enabling Drupal ECA, you can enable the ECA access module that gives you access to all of the actions and events that have to deal with controlling access to entities or access to fields. The ECA config can look at all of the events that are happening when you're deleting config or changing config or updating config. Same with content and queues and everything else here for rendering. So, depending on what you're wanting to do, depending on how you want to kind of combine these actions and events, you can pick and choose and label which ones, but here's just a quick overview. And so each of these kind of represent a different kind of realm of how Drupal is organized. and how it's kind of, either its templating engine or how it builds all these pages for being a CMS. Okay, so when we're talking about events, and we're looking at all these different plugins we have access to, I've kind of combined a list of many popular kind of event subscribers that ECA can kind of tap into. So all of those circles, you can have an event that is doing something that's controlling or looking at access, with the things I said about importing and changing config. Anytime you're dealing with like view mode changes or changing how things are being displayed. Content entities, the kind of event dispatchers that fire when you're modifying content, there's a lot of different events that can happen. So we kind of need to know sometimes based on what we're trying to build of like which step of the chain we want to be interacting with, but the client might not always know, but it is good to kind of have them be able to see or just be able to understand that when you're dealing with content entities, you have all these different types of events, either validating or pre-saving or loading. And yeah, so there's events for entity forms and submitting forms and validating forms and labeling log messages and meta tags and all the workflow transition content moderation ones. And same with dealing with users, logging in, logging out, and then all of the rendering and building of views, querying as well, are also events and things that fire events. Okay. Or conditions, different types of conditions that we have. I kind of define what they are, but just to kind of do a quick just overview of different types of conditions. You have comparing values, checking to see if entities exist, checking to see if the user actually has permission to do what they're trying to do with roles, checking user permissions or IDs. So you could have something that only admins can do, or have something that is only something that you want anonymous users to do. So you just define, you can check to see if field values have been updated in forms. I didn't realize that. Oh yeah, there's a whole like validation check that happens with forms, and so there's a lot of conditions of like, hey, does this form pass the validation check? So you can have something that's just checking, well, if you can do this page, you might not have been able to update a page because you missed out one of those asked or required fields. And then tampering as well is just checking with a whole bunch of things with what the value or field or string you're looking at to see if it's something that's meeting the condition that you want. And then here are some actions that ECA can automate for you. So displaying messages and publishing and unpublishing entities, or marking things as sticky and promote. People sometimes use these still, where they want to be able to have promote be sticky or promoted, and they have to manually go and click and change things and up things up, and then they get upset when this one view is showing the wrong order for things, and it's like, you need to use the right one. These are things that we can use ECA actions just to have certain things be automated, or having things, after a certain period of time, we just have them not be sticky anymore. Sending emails, cloning entities and creating and deleting, those all are also actions. And same with all the other ones here, rendering and logging and all that. So here's like a quick overview of just, if you don't know what Drupal actions are, these are a list of different things of what all of those squares can be, and different combinations of things. But yes, we're coders and we like custom code, and so we can make our own custom events or own custom actions. And so just like using custom code to get some field values to do that, we can just use custom code, but for defining and describing events and actions in ECA, if you know what you need to do and you're not using one of the base kind of plugins for events and actions, you have full capabilities of adding your own and using your own. You also have access to trigger events with Drush. So if you have, say, an event that is taking a look at the list of views and values, rows in the view, and you know that the user can just print the view, but sometimes they ask you for reports of things, but it's not really enough to really warrant export CSV or something. You can still just like use and run Drush commands to just trigger events to fire in the site, or trigger events that will like output a print if you have that action that does that as a log message. So there's lots of ways to add ECA to trigger, to add to the events that you wanted to listen for, and then also you can just put in like manual triggers of like, hey, I want this ECA to do something, but only when the client asks for it, or only when it's important, and not really like a thing that happens, or even attach it to cron, and just be like, do it when the cron runs. Okay. So, if you wanted to use Drupal ECA, or if you tried installing Drupal ECA, and you're like, oh, the ECA, so you've heard it before, it's like rules, you want to install it, it's kind of like odd and awkward to get started. You kind of need to, require the package as normal. You need to enable at least ECA core, the UI, the base, and then the VPN to be able to get access to the modeler. And then from there, you can pick and choose which ones you need. But if you kind of don't have those ones, it's really hard to understand what's going on or missing. And so you're kind of enabling a module, and then you have to like enable like these parts of it too. Okay. And we're getting pretty ready for the demo. I'm going to want to show. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that like there's a way that you can use ECA and kind of like over-architect something or over-complicate something that it's not really meant to replace other like contrib code. But there's things, and there's like hey, like this is what ECA can do, and you have to kind of understand or know when's the right time to use it, or when the client is asking for this like human factor kind of thing of getting teams to kind of work together or like talk to each other. And they're like, oh, I never got that email. But like a lot of like ECA's kind of like use cases, I think, are around solving like either social problems, or like you have certain situations that are having some staff do a lot of repeated tasks, and then they start complaining about how long it takes to update content. That like, we're not trying to redo and remake everything in Drupal ECA, but there's definitely times where we can kind of either grow our understanding of how Drupal's working using ECA and kind of understand what we have available, and then all that dialogue and being able to get clients that maybe don't know code and be like, yo, can you describe what you want in this modeler? And then we can talk about it and then, identify like, hey, this is how we're using this in Drupal, or Drupal core can already do this. And it's not up to them to know what the best feature is, but we can kind of use this modeler as a way to like pull out information for where they're at. So let's switch over. Let's see if I can do this quickly. If I go like that, okay, that's part of it. Yes, cancel that, and then go up to here. Okay. Everyone can see that? Okay, I think so. All right, so right now I'm logged out of the site. I'm going to just do a Drush UI to log in. I'm going to use just one finger. Okay, so I just logged in, and I have an ECA that's turned on that says, hey, welcome back, admin, and you've been here 17 times. So that's kind of just showing off that example of just, hey, you want something to happen when you're logging in, and as our example, we're just reading a field and giving it back and displaying a message, but you could really put any other action that you need to do when someone's logging in, and then just have the message displayed at the end to be like, okay, like something happened. That sometimes you don't want events and actions to run on their own by accident. So that's actually looking better than on my screen. Cool. So I'm in the configuration workflows area on the site, and I have a bunch of ECA models. I turned most of them off for right now, and we kind of pick and choose which ones to look at. This is actually an updated version. There we go, that looks more recent. Okay. So just to kind of go over the UI a bit, people haven't seen it before, and how this kind of works. I kind of demoed it there, but yeah, you have the events, and you can assign which ones that you want to do. Just so selecting from here. This long list of events are all of the different event listeners that ECA kind of provides to you by default. So based on what you're wanting to do, or if you're wanting to kind of understand about like which part is the best for Drupal, they all have different informations for things, and you can assign which event you want. So a lot of the time you're going to be looking to see what's available from all these different events in the modules that you have enabled, and then you are, it's too big. And then from here, you have arrows that are the conditions that link to other things, and then you can also set up different squares, and there's a whole bunch of like moving things around and the like backing up, undoing works sometimes, and you can just copy code and move things around and add different values for things. So from here, I don't have any conditions, but you just need to highlight the one that you want, pick and choose what you want to change, and then set those things. So for this one that I described, we're just naming the token as count, and then when we want to use it, we can just call the token of count. But sometimes it gets tricky when you're dealing with actual tokens, and you have like, oh, no title, and you also are dealing with count. So sometimes implementing these or making these from scratch can get a bit weird, or just a bit harder to use. But here what we're doing is we're reading a value, incrementing by 1, writing it back, the new value, and saving it. So it's changing that value, saving it, and then displaying the message as the token. So this kind of shows the mix of having the token from Drupal's UI token that's just taking the account name, and then also the token that we defined in here. So that's kind of how these are working with the modeler. They can do a bunch of different things. The next one I can show you here. To enable these and disable them, there's just an executable kind of checkbox that you need to just update, and then that will just kind of cease that event chain from being available. I don't want it to get super confusing with all of these ones, but just for demoing purposes, I'll just run them one at a time so we can understand what's happening. But this one I wanted to show off next because I find it as like oh, that's a very like simple way to just do it and have it. Is that I have a event that is pre-rendered, and so it's looking at a view that I have made. It's called list of logs. I have it right here. So I just have a simple view page of a bunch of Minecraft logs. And what I can do with this is say, hey, when you're at that pre-render step before you just render it all, can you just use this action that's called set active theme and change it to a different theme name? So on my site, I have graphical is my main default theme that I use to theme this, but I have the admin theme, but I do have Lefebvre installed as an example where they could use like a sub theme or something. But if I have this one enabled like this, and then save, and then reload that page. I think I should just go actually. So as it was rendering this view, it changed from, well, I'm not supposed to really give you the graphical view. It looks for all of our now. So that one variable got switched, and so now we're able to like just instead of having to make a whole different sub-theme, or instead of having to like predefine like a sub-theme microsite kind of things, and there's other ways to do this in Drupal. But if you just have an ECA kind of like, hey, like I just want a different visual output for this one page, or for these other pages that clients are using that aren't really published to outside viewers, but they need it to look a certain way, or they just want it to be different. You can use ECA to update and change those, and then monitor them and track them. Another example I wanted to show is this anonymous one. Yeah. So I have, I'm looking for an event when it's loading a node. There's a basic page, and if it is node 9 and the user is anonymous, then redirect them to the login page. If I have a page, for example, that's just like, hey, like I can redirect them, but like, just, you know, you could use other forms of redirects, but just as a simple trigger thing, you can have this on here, and now that it's on, so I had a page. Where is it? Oh, I think I lost it. So I can look incognito, and then node 9, and by trying to go to node 9, it doesn't give me like an error page or like oh, you can't see this. But node 9 with ECA turned on is just kind of rewriting access to say, hey, like if you could sign in, maybe yeah, you can view that page when you're signed in. That's a thing that you can do. So a big point to highlight is that you can really mix and match based on what you need to do with any of the events and any of the redirects and any of the actions that you want to do in the site. So I'm going to just turn that off if I can see it too much. Another one I wanted to show is just a way to kind of demonstrate how Drupal's events driver works for logs or for any entity. So all the events that are happening when you're looking at entities or loading entities or deleting entities, that we can just set up an event to, hey, listen, and then get the node title and display it. So if you were curious about how Drupal works when it's rendering content, or if you're like trying to troubleshoot or get ECA to work properly, and you're like, oh man, like why is my node empty? That when this is turned on, it's going to give a bunch of messages. Oh, we don't need to do that. Click. Okay. So if I look at a log, like I want this guy, I have messages now that are now showing that's telling me what step of Drupal's like rendering process we're at. So if we're at the event for preloading, we don't see what the node title is because the entity hasn't loaded yet. But when we get to the load a content entity, we're able to see that there's the name Enderman because it can view it, and then there's preparing the content entity view, which is this view mode that we have, and then we're actually viewing the content. So depending on what you're doing, if you are viewing content, you'll get like this list of messages, or this list of events that are updating, and then if you're like deleting something, it loads a different set of events, and then to actually like delete something, there's quite a bit of it. Well, that's how I get all the other ones. But for what we care about for the Enderman one is that there's a prepare content form, and then a pre-delete, and then delete, and then it's been deleted. So an updating content, or if you are kind of messing with ECA, or like it's kind of like a barrier to like know how to like make meaningful ECA rules that are really like breaking functionality of the site. Just kind of knowing how Drupal is working can be a benefit. Because anytime you are viewing or editing or deleting or changing, you have a different list that's setting up. So it's important to know when you're configuring these and how to properly like pick the right event that sets up for what you're trying to do. And you could do these with custom code, but if you don't have custom code base, or if you're trying to get this like to a viewing audience that understands, then you can just use ECA. So I want to show that. Time. Okay. Let's see if we have another one here. Okay. I want to show this one too, because I found that this is something that doesn't really always come up, but there's just times to be aware of Drupal's rendering and like being able to like overwrite this with like Twig. When it's like, oh, I need this text to show up, and then you have to go into the theme and then write a Twig template, and then you're updating that Twig template in that form to get the right text that you need to appear. That like, there's times where we're trying to get the theme to kind of leverage some of this information that Drupal has, and Drupal ECA has this render entity. So when I am rendering a blog, so it's already after the pre-build step and at the rendering step, I want to pre-append the text to display, which I'm just saying, this is render text, and you can add it either like before, this one's the same thing, but just rendering after. And so Drupal is going to load the entity, and then as it's going to like display the entity, these actions are going to fire, and it's going to add text to above and below the blocks that we just saw. So this is turn on, and text tab. Okay, so if you had reasons to pre-append or change things for text. For your text, you can have your content that's loaded and then just have either information that is storing a token and then rendering it out afterwards, that you can just have them exist and be there during that render step. So you're able to leverage the rendering system to be able to make changes to your things that aren't really like, if they're things that don't need to be stored in a database, or if you're finding that you're like storing blocks that they don't really need to exist in other places, but they're not really stored in the field. ECA kind of fits in a role of being able to just manipulate the data that's almost fully out of its rendering setup and preloading, and be able to do that. And I might have time for one more if I have an interesting one. The content moderation one has I need a patch to get this working, so I'm not 100% sure this will work, but it's looking for changes in moderation state, and then it's going to display a message to say what state things are in now. So if I turn this one on, and then I have project somewhere. This one, I think I had everything here. Let's just say we don't want this folded. And we want to save it as not published but under review because we want someone to look at it. It will now, because it was looking for content moderation and then it's looking for, oh, hey, like the content moderation event had fired, it's now looking and then displaying what the moderation state it's in. So these are things that you can send and add actions to send emails to. So if you have a group of content editors that are all managing and maintaining content and they need to like be aware that things are changing, then you can just have Drupal just send an email to notify that person to be like, yo, like there's things that are in the review box that are there. I find that having a way to get a larger system to get people to stay in Drupal is an issue that we struggle with sometimes, where you have a team that is keeping the database up to date, but they're kind of still using other sources, or they're using other messaging systems or other things to be able to communicate to each other. And then if there's other like human kind of breakdowns of communication or other things that are causing delays or things that are happening, that you can use ECA to be able to like, okay, like what are you doing on the site? Okay, let's go and figure out how to make those processes work faster for them. That's what I have there. So just as a, going back to my slides, if I can. Let's go like that. Okay. So just to summarize what problems I'm advocating for ECA to solve, it provides the visual interpretations of what Drupal processes are and how to be able to make them and create them. You can create and maintain your own custom event chains. It's easier to maintain long term if you have a bunch of custom code that's in a module and then you're upgrading that module and things that are happening. You might have to like, oh, there's a thing that's happening. Who wrote this? How do you go find this? It's a lot longer to go through a bunch of custom code modules to say, hey, where these custom things are. Where if you're using ECA, you just see the list of all of the ECA modules that are enabled, and you can kind of look and see what they are, and it's a little bit easier. All of those recipes, all of those models, they are exportable, and with Drupal CMS, you can import those models as recipes and install them once. So it can solve needs for needing extra modules or custom code for things. And it does provide a no-code visualizer and it can show people, or it can be used for teaching or demoing how some of Drupal's internal working works. And there's a code visualizer for people who are just trying to get the logic kind of in and going. And then it provides a way for site maintainers to kind of like rough draft a visual workflow of what they're wanting to do. And they might not care about how Drupal works, or might never know how Drupal works, but they can still kind of get a sense of visualizing, okay, this is the business stuff that we just need things to happen and make it work. And then, you know, if people are spending time making Google Drawings, just make it an ECA and just save them as visual things. And then you can use the ones that are needed. So we talked over use cases and streamlining in all processes. And yeah, okay, cool. All right, so we have like a couple minutes for questions if anyone has anything. Yes?
I've seen the layer module the first time, just a couple of questions.
Yeah.
It looks like you have like multiple, listed for multiple events.
Yes. So you can't chain events together, an event leading directly to another event. Events can only lead to actions, but you can have the whole page be a list of multiple actions or multiple nested actions, events, and you can have an action that says, hey, trigger that next event. So you can have a proper kind of network of, hey, I want these events, and then based on some conditions, then go do this. And so you can really kind of modularize what you need things to do. But yeah, the events kind of exist, and you can have them all that are in there. And I'm pretty sure if you have a token that's defined, you can tell, hey, these tokens need to persist and also pass it along to the next event. They don't always know of all of each other, because then you have problems with variables getting out of scope. So it's all like locally based. But if you're telling the events, hey, now trigger this event and bring your information forward, the tokens there will be there. That helps. There's also those like diamond gate things, but I didn't really go into the monolith things. Yeah.
I noticed as well in the example where you have the pre-render and post-render, it did both. Like I'm expecting, when I look at a flow chart, I'm expecting it to go to one place and like that's it. But
yeah, it's because I chained them both together. Yeah, so they both fired. But yeah, you could have it set up where it's doing what you need it to do. Yes?
This looks really powerful, like there's a lot of potential, especially for someone who doesn't know code, they can play around and get something together really quick. It looks like it's also a little bit dangerous too.
Yeah.
Like, something with 3 or 5 boxes in it, that looks pretty straightforward, but create something that's got 25 boxes in it, that maybe nobody else can understand, or continues to grow over time. Do you have any thoughts on like what the limit is?
Yeah, you have to know what you're doing, and if you accidentally put it in something incorrectly, and then it like affects prod, and then it's like, oh, everyone can't access pages, then yeah, it can cause some pretty drastic changes that are kind of overriding what things are. But also, if you know how it works and you need to fix something, then you don't have to, oh no, there's this problem, I need to like update this thing. You can just you can fix some problems that would take a deploy and changing custom code. If there's an error, be like, okay, this code isn't custom code, I need to go change it, I need to update that module to Composer and then push it up. That if you're able to kind of make these and make them in a way that kind of makes sense for your environment, the like needing to maintain or needing to fix them, it's just a simple kind of swapping and swapping out. You can export the changes and keep them and share them. So I've seen examples and models of like some complex ones, and even for me and my understanding of Drupal, there's some powerful things in there of like, I don't even know how that really works, but kind of seeing it and going through it, and there's times with like tokens where I'll like try and do something in my development experience and it'd be like, oh man, you can't see this variable yet. It needs to be there. So yeah, it does come with like if you know Drupal's internal kind of workings and you already know what the expected behavior is, and if you kind of think of it and like make it in custom code, it might be faster just to write it in custom code and then be able to maintain it and take charge of it. But if you have other people on your team that you're constantly trying to fight with, of like, no, this is how it works, this is how it's happening, they might have an easier time of understanding the flowcharts than understanding your code. or like understanding that the code is working, or like a proof of thing that they just, there's a bunch of like trust stuff. That helps. Yes?
So can you duplicate the models and then rename them with different names? For example, for me, like I'm running a program, okay?
Yeah.
So a client signs in on our this information on the web form, requests some kind of approval, okay? And then with a different role, an analyst logs in and sees what the client submit and approving that particular web form, that information that is there. And this is pretty much applied for different programs, A, B, and C. Can I call them different names using the same models and just keep duplicating those?
Yeah, you can do them, and they would run. I think the order, like which one would fire first, is based on like the ranking of the ECA thing there. But I've seen like actions that just have like multiple different conditions, and so it's firing multiple times, or like based on different sets of criteria, or if you're having something that you want to replicate, but like just change a couple things and have it be extended again, that they can work together or be reused. So when it comes to that, I'm pretty sure you can reuse the stuff for that. Like the modeler is even good at like, oh, I need to put this like I made a mistake, I need to put this action in, but like you can just drop the action like in the line and we'll just map it all and set it up. So it's more just like you're building up the chains of what the process will do, and then when you save it and then the event fires, it will just go through it. And there is somewhat of a debugger for it, but it didn't quite do that. Yes?
Any performance hit for having the visual modeler installed on the site? If all you're doing is something really simple, I mean, you mentioned it.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Or best practices for saving it or taking it out once the site's launched.
Yeah, I didn't show the one that had the what it would look like for using the other one, but yeah, it's not mandatory to use it. They made it completely like independent from it, and that as long as you're setting up the form, you can still use it. So you can have like, say the modeler is active in like a QA environment, and then once you get to prod, you don't want site maintainers to be messing with the actual executions of them, but they're still there, still running. You can do it from there, or just have the. I don't think the modeler would really do much as it's being used, but I'm not sure. Okay. All right, I think we're pretty much out of time, and we have the unconference that's starting in 10 minutes. So I'll let everyone go, and thank you so much. Oh yeah, I should do that. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Quick question.
Sure. Thank you.
Rules.
Yes.
Rules like your code of moderation example is kind of interesting because I kind of give my I tell them to do that because that's the incorrect code of moderation.
Yeah.
Because rules has no unchanged, no right. So you can say your moderation state doesn't equal what it used to be.
Right.
Because you never want to send someone emails if the moderation state hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed.
You never if it's published and you hit save.
Yeah.
You don't want to send that out again. You want to say, if it wasn't published before and now it's published, send an email.
Oh, yeah.
So you have the unchanged, entity unchanged value in there.
You can keep track, right? Because when you're doing content moderation, it has like the free like the post.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the ECA exposed that to you. You can say, okay, so the unchanged value is not published and the changed value is published. Now let's send an email.
Yeah. And there's certainly definitely parts of this where like content moderation or like there's a content moderation notification that already sends emails for things. So there's times where it's like, oh, well, you could just use that module, but then at what point is that extra module that's doing this thing isn't perfect? And it's like, well, I can patch the notification, or I'll just do an ECA, just do the
You can see you knew this stuff well, and it is a decision. I bring in another bigger module and put a hook, and it's like 3 lines of code in a hook.
Yeah.
Or should I just bring in a contrib that just specifically does that? So it's good you brought that up.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Hi there.
Yes, I'm not so much about the Drupal stuff, but also the idea that there was just the recent collection and stuff. So I'm thinking we just do apply for your document or submit somebody goes through different process.
Yeah.
Whether I go to some kind of idea or
Right. Okay.
So just one, because you guys, you can have things
Yes.
submit and then you can always condition to the next step. So that's something basic you can see fine. What the flow is.
For sure. Especially if you have, like, you're using a portal and you are clicking buttons that are going somewhere, and then you want the validation checks to happen. Okay, like checks out.
Because for example, you've got a bill, something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sometimes, one person, and now special amount of action, you have to do the signature.
You can do parallel. Yeah. There's gates. So there's like a diamond and an X, and so you can set in an action, event is firing, right? And then you can set it. It's like a condition, but it's like, hey, for these users, send them this way. For other users that don't, or others, then send them off. And then you can have them do other things. You don't
Yeah, or maybe they have to do a knowledge to separate by one another both.
Yes.
Before
Yeah, you can have them like catch up again. You mean like?
I mean, yeah, it's more like a parent, but what you complete is separated by the
Right. Yeah.
Parent to identify either finish it two.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to complete finish it two. Sometimes you have
Oh,
to finish one.
like looping it in there. I think you can. From what I saw from the maintainers, they were talking a lot about like views and like looping through like view rows and things. And so because you have access to events from like when views are being built, you can like make the list of what you need and then fire those new events.
So this is the event. Basically, it's some procedure between
Yeah.
It's necessary from each
Right. Any questions about?
each action.
Yeah.
It's a critical blocking. You can see one page, another
Yeah,
one
so it needs to, so naturally it gets access to all of the event subscribers that Drupal does, right? So buttons themselves, like using JavaScript for like event listeners for things, they kind of have their own like trigger system that Drupal doesn't really care about, but what they do care about is routing, right? So when you click on a link and you're going to another Drupal page, there are event lists that will run there. Yeah, so like as it's sending a response to Drupal, that's when events are being fired. So you just need to either like know like, okay, when do I check this? Like when does Drupal like keep a log of who's doing what? And then, oh, okay, that's what you want to tap into. But if you want to make your own events that are like on a button that's on a page, but like, hey, just hit this button and do it big.
So this is where it can be posted after the design page.
Yeah.
Or you can change it.
Yeah, like it'd be great if you could have like someone who's managing a portal and they have like a dashboard of like these are buttons that I need to click that cause send off the ECAs. I'm sure you could do that in some way, but it's just either I'm not sure what the best way to do that is, but I mean you can assign API like it has access to API calls too. So at a certain point you just need to find out like what are you trying to do, how complex is it?